Welcome back to the continuation of our story. This is part 2 of our tale, so if you haven't checked out part 1, I recommend you do that first. Now, let's dive back into the narrative. I have slept in the homes of the poor, and I have slept in palaces, and I have slept beneath the stars, and would have told you before that night that all places were one to me. But I woke before first light, convinced we had to be gone from that place, but not knowing why, and I woke Callum by putting a finger to his lips, and silently we left that croft on the mountainside without saying our farewells, and I have never been more pleased to be gone from anywhere. We were a mile from the place when I said, "The island." You asked if it would be there. Surely, an island is there, or it is not there. Callum hesitated. He seemed to be weighing his words, and then he said, "The Misty Isle is not like other places, and the mist that surrounds it is not like other mists." We walked down a path worn by hundreds of years of sheep and deer, and few enough men. He said, "They also call it the Winged Isle. Some say it is because the island, if seen from above, would look like butterfly wings, and I do not know the truth of it." Then, "And what is truth?" said jesting Pilate. "It is harder coming down than it is going up." I thought about it. Sometimes, I think that truth is a place. In my mind, it is like a city. There can be 100 roads, 1,000 paths, that will all take you eventually to the same place. It does not matter where you come from. If you walk toward the truth, you will reach it, whatever path you take. Callum McInnes looked down at me and said nothing. Then, "You are wrong. The truth is a cave in the Black Mountains. There is one way there, and one only, and that way is treacherous and hard. And if you choose the wrong path, you will die alone on the mountainside." We crested the ridge, and we looked down to the coast. I could see villages below, beside the water, and I could see high black mountains before me, on the other side of the sea, coming out of the mist. Callum said, "There's your cave, in those mountains." The bones of the earth, I thought, seeing them. And then I became uncomfortable, thinking of bones, and to distract myself I said, "And how many times have you been there?" "Only once." He hesitated. "I searched for it all my 16th year, for I had heard the legends, and I believed if I sought I should find. I was 17 when I reached it, and came back with all the gold coins I could carry." "And were you not frightened of the curse?" "When I was young, I was afraid of nothing." "What did you do with your gold?" "A portion I buried, and I alone know where. The rest I used as a bride price for the woman I loved, and I built a fine house with it." He stopped as if he had already said too much. There was no ferryman at the jetty, only a small boat, hardly big enough for 3 full-sized men, tied to a tree trunk on the shore, twisted and half dead, and a bell beside it. I sounded the bell, and soon enough a fat man came down the shore. He said to Callum, "It will cost you a shilling for the ferry, and your boy 3 pennies." I stood tall. I am not as big as other men are, but I have as much pride as any of them. "I am also a man," I said. "I'll pay your shilling." The ferryman looked me up and down. Then he scratched his beard. "I beg your pardon. My eyes are not what they once were. I shall take you to the island." I handed him a shilling. He weighed it in his hand. "That's 9 pence you did not cheat me out of. 9 pennies are a lot of money in this dark age." The water was the color of slate, although the sky was blue, and whitecaps chased one another across the water's surface. He untied the boat and hauled it, rattling, down the shingle to the water. We waded out into the cold water and clambered inside. The splash of oars on seawater, and the boat propelled forward in easy movements. I sat closest to the ferryman. I said, "Ninepence. It is good wages. But I have heard of a cave in the mountains on the Misty Isle, filled with gold coins, the treasure of the ancients." He shook his head dismissively. Callum was staring at me, lips pressed together so hard they were white. I ignored him and asked the man again. "A cave filled with golden coins, a gift from the Norsemen or the Southerners, or from those who they say were here long before any of us, those who fled into the West as the people came." "Heard of it," said the ferryman. "Heard also of the curse of it. I reckon that one can take care of the other." He spat into the sea. Then he said, "You're an honest man, dwarf. I see it in your face. Do not seek this cave. No good can come of it." "I am sure you are right," I told him without guile. "I am certain I am," he said. "For not every day is it that I take a reaver and a little dwarf man to the Misty Isle." Then he said, "In this part of the world, it is not considered lucky to talk about those who went to the West." We rode the rest of the boat journey in silence, though the sea became choppier, and the waves splashed into the side of the boat, such that I held on with both hands for fear of being swept away. And after what seemed like half a lifetime, the boat was tied to a long jetty of black stones. We walked the jetty as the waves crashed around us, the salt spray kissing our faces. There was a humpbacked man at the landing, selling oatcakes and plums dried until they were almost stones. I gave him a penny and filled my jerkin pockets with them. We walked on into the Misty Isle. I am old now, or at least, I am no longer young, and everything I see reminds me of something else I've seen, such that I see nothing for the first time. A bonny girl, her hair fiery red, reminds me only of another 100 such lasses, and their mothers, and what they were as they grew, and what they looked like when they died. It is the curse of age, that all things are reflections of other things. I say that, but my time on the Misty Isle, which is also called, by the wise, the Winged Isle, reminds me of nothing but itself. It is a day from that jetty until you reach the Black Mountains. Callum McInnes looked at me, half his size or less, and he set off at a loping stride, as if challenging me to keep up. His legs propelled him across the ground, which was wet and all ferns and heather. Above us, low clouds were scudding, gray and white and black, hiding each other and revealing and hiding again. I let him get ahead of me, let him press on into the rain, until he was swallowed by the wet gray haze. Then, and only then, I ran. This is one of the secret things of me, the things I have not revealed to any person, save to Morag, my wife, and Johnny and James, my sons, and Flora, my daughter. May the shadows rest her poor soul. I can run, and I can run well, and if I need to, I can run faster and longer and more sure-footedly than any full-sized man. And it was like this that I ran then, through the mist and the rain, taking to the high ground and the black rock ridges, yet keeping below the skyline. He was ahead of me, but I spied him soon, and I ran on and I ran past him, on the high ground with the brow of the hill between us. Below us was a stream. I can run for days without stopping. That is the first of my 3 secrets, and one secret I have revealed to no man. We had discussed already where we would camp that first night on the Misty Isle, and Callum had told me that we would spend the night beneath the rock that is called Man and Dog, for it is said that it looks like an old man with his dog by his side, and I reached it late in the afternoon. There was a shelter beneath the rock, which was protected and dry, and some of those who had been before us had left firewood behind, sticks and twigs and branches. I made a fire and dried myself in front of it and took the chill from my bones. The wood smoke blew out across the heather. It was dark when Callum loped into the shelter and looked at me as if he had not expected to see me that side of midnight. I said, "What took you so long, Callum McInnes?" He said nothing, only stared at me. I said, "There is trout, boiled in mountain water, and a fire to warm your bones." He nodded. We ate trout, drank whiskey to warm ourselves. There was a mound of heather and of ferns, dried and brown, piled high in the rear of the shelter, and we slept upon that, wrapped tight in our damp cloaks. I woke in the night. There was cold steel against my throat, the flat of the blade, not the edge. I said, "And why would you ever kill me in the night, Callum McInnes? For our way is long, and our journey is not yet over." He said, "I do not trust you, dwarf." "It is not me you must trust," I told him, "but those that I serve. And if you left with me, but returned without me, there are those who will know the name of Callum McInnes and cause it to be spoken in the shadows." The cold blade remained in my throat. He said, "How did you get ahead of me?" And here was I, repaying ill with good, for I made you food and a fire. I am a hard man to lose, Callum McInnes, and it will become a guide to do as you did today. Now take your dirk from my throat and let me sleep." He said nothing, but after a few moments, the blade was removed. I forced myself neither to sigh nor to breathe, hoping he could not hear my heart pounding in my chest, and I slept no more that night. For breakfast, I made porridge and threw in some dried plums to soften them. The mountains were black and gray against the white of the sky. We saw eagles, huge and ragged, circling above us. Callum set a sober pace, and I walked beside him, taking 2 steps for every one of his. "How long?" I asked him. "A day, perhaps 2. It depends upon the weather. If the clouds come down, then 2 days, or even 3. The clouds came down at noon, and the world was blanketed by a mist that was worse than rain. Droplets of water hung in the air, soaked our clothes and our skin. The rocks we walked upon became treacherous, and Callum and I slowed in our ascent, stepping carefully. We were walking up the mountain, not climbing, up goat paths and craggy, sharp ways. The rocks were black and slippery. We walked and climbed and clambered and clung. We slipped and slid and stumbled and staggered. And even in the mist, Callum knew where he was going, and I followed him. He paused at a waterfall that splashed across our path, thick as the trunk of an oak. He took the thin rope from his shoulders, wrapped it about a rock. "This was not here before," he told me. "I'll go first." He tied one end of the rope about his waist and edged out along the path, into the falling water, pressing his body against the wet rock face, edging slowly, intently through the sheet of water. I was scared for him, scared for both of us, holding my breath as he passed, only breathing when he was on the other side of the waterfall. He tested the rope, pulled on it, motioned me to follow him, when a rock gave way beneath his foot, and he slipped on the wet rock and fell into the abyss. The rope held, and the rock beside me held. Callum McInnes dangled from the end of the rope. He looked up at me, and I sighed, anchored myself by a slab of crag, and I wound and pulled him up and up. I hauled him back onto the path, dripping and cursing. He said, "You're stronger than you look." And I cursed myself for being a fool. He must have seen it on my face, for after he shook himself, like a dog, sending droplets flying, he said, "My boy Callum told me the tale you told him about the Campbells coming for you, and you being sent into the fields by your wife, with them thinking she was your ma and you a boy. It was just a tale, I said. Something to pass the time. Indeed, he said, for I heard tell of a raiding party of Campbells sent out a few years ago, seeking revenge on someone who had taken their cattle. They went, and they never came back. If a small fellow like you can kill a dozen Campbells, well, you must be strong, and you must be fast. I must be stupid, I thought ruefully, telling that child that tale. I had picked them off one by one, like rabbits, as they came out to piss or to see what had happened to their friends. I had killed 7 of them before my wife killed her first. We buried them in the glen, built a small cairn of stacking stones above them to weigh them down so their ghosts would not walk, and we were sad that Campbells had come so far to kill me that we had been forced to kill them in return. I take no joy in killing. No man should, and no woman. Sometimes death is necessary, but it is always an evil thing. That is something I am in no doubt of, even after the events I speak of here. I took the rope from Callum McKin's, and I clambered up and up, over the rocks, to where the waterfall came out of the side of the hill, and it was narrow enough for me to cross. It was slippery there, but I made it over without incident, tied the rope in place, came down it, threw the end of it to my companion, and walked him across. He did not thank me, neither for rescuing him, nor for getting us across, and I did not expect thanks. I also did not expect what he actually said, though, which was, "You are not a whole man, and you are ugly. Your wife, is she also small and ugly, like yourself?" I decided to take no offense, whether the offense had been intended or not. I simply said, "She is not. She is a tall woman, almost as tall as you, and when she was young, when we were both younger, she was reckoned by some to be the most beautiful girl in the lowlands. The bards wrote songs praising her green eyes and her long red golden hair." I thought I saw him flinch at this, but it is possible that I imagined it, or more likely, wished to imagine I had seen it. "How did you win her then?" I spoke the truth. I wanted her, and I got what I wanted. I did not give up. She said I was wise and I was kind, and I would always provide for her, and I have. The clouds began to lower, once more, and the world blurred at the edges, becoming softer. She said I would be a good father, and I have done my best to raise my children, who are also, if you're wondering, normal-sized. "I beat sense into young Callum," said older Callum. "He is not a bad child." "You can only do that as long as they are there with you," I said. And then I stopped talking, and I remembered that long year, and also I remembered Flora when she was small, sitting on the floor with jam on her face, looking up at me as if I were the wisest man in the world. Ran away, eh? I ran away when I was a lad. I was 12. I went as far as the court of the king, over the water, the father of the current king. That's not something you hear spoken aloud. "I'm not afraid," he said. "Not here. Who's to hear us? Eagles?" I saw him. He was a fat man who spoke the language of the foreigners well, and our own tongue only with difficulty, but he was still our king. He paused. "And if he is to come to us again, he will need gold for vessels and weapons, and to feed the troops that he raises." I said, "So I believe. That is why we go in search of the cave." He said, "This is bad gold. It does not come free. It has its cost. Everything has its cost." I was remembering every landmark, climb at the sheep skull, cross the first 3 streams, then walk along the 4th until the 5 heaped stones, and find where the rock looks like a seagull, and walk on between 2 sharply jutting walls of black rock, and let the slope bring you with it. I could remember it, I knew. well enough to find my way down again. But the mists confused me, and I could not be certain. We reached a small loch high in the mountains and drank fresh water, caught huge white creatures that were not shrimps or lobsters or crayfish, and ate them raw like sausages, for we could not find any dry wood to make our fire that high. We slept on a wide ledge beside the icy water and woke into clouds before sunrise, when the world was gray and blue. You were sobbing in your sleep, said Callum. I had a dream, I told him. I do not have bad dreams, Callum said. It was a good dream, I said. It was true. I had dreamed that Flora still lived. She was grumbling about the village boys and telling me of her time in the hills with the cattle and of things of no consequence, smiling her great smile and tossing her hair the whole, red golden like her mother's, although her mother's hair is now streaked with white. Good dreams should not make a man cry out like that, said Callum. A pause, then. I have no dreams. Not good, not bad. No? Not since I was a young man. We rose. A thought struck me. Did you stop dreaming after you came to the cave? He said nothing. We walked along the mountainside, into the mist, as the sun came up. The mist seemed to thicken and fill with light, in the sunshine, but did not fade away, and I realized that it must be a cloud. The world glowed. And then it seemed to me that I was staring at a man of my size, a small, humpty man, his shadow standing in the air in front of me, like a ghost or an angel, and it moved as I moved. It was haloed by the light and shimmered, and I could not have told you how near it was or how far away. I have seen miracles, and I have seen evil things, but never have I seen anything like that. Is it magic? I asked, although I smelled no magic on the air. Callum said, It is nothing, a property of the light, a shadow, a reflection, no more. I see a man beside me as well. He moves as I move. I glanced back, but I saw nobody beside him. And then the little glowing man in the air faded, and the cloud, and it was day, and we were alone. We climbed all that morning, ascending. Callum's ankle had twisted the day before, when he had slipped at the waterfall. Now it swelled in front of me, swelled and went red, but his pace did not ever slow, and if he was in discomfort or in pain, it did not show upon his face. I said, How long? As the dusk began to blur the edges of the world. An hour, less, perhaps. We will reach the cave, and then we will sleep for the night. In the morning, you will go inside. You can bring out as much gold as you can carry, and we will make our way back off the island. I looked at him, then. Gray-streaked hair, gray eyes, so huge and wolfish a man. And I said, You would sleep outside the cave? I would. There are no monsters in the cave. Nothing that will come out and take you in the night. Nothing that will eat us. But you should not go in until daylight. And then we rounded a rockfall, all black rocks and gray, half blocking our path, and we saw the cave mouth. I said, Is that all? You expected marble pillars? Or a giant's cave from a gossip's fireside tales? Perhaps. It looks like nothing. A hole in the rock face, a shadow. And there are no guards? No guards, only the place and what it is. A cave filled with treasure. And you are the only one who can find it? Callum laughed then, like a fox's bark. The islanders know how to find it, but they are too wise to come here to take its gold. They say that the cave makes you evil, that each time you visit it, each time you enter to take gold, it eats the good in your soul, so they do not enter. And is that true? Does it make you evil? No. The cave feeds on something else, not good and evil. Not really. You can take your gold, But afterwards, he paused, things are flat. There is less beauty in a rainbow, less meaning in a sermon, less joy in a kiss. He looked at the cave mouth, and I thought I saw fear in his eyes. Less, I said. There are many for whom the lure of gold outweighs the beauty of a rainbow. Me, when young, for one. You now for another. So we go in at dawn. You will go in. I will wait for you out here. Do not be afraid. No monster guards the cave. No spells to make the gold vanish, if you do not know some cantrip or rhyme. We made our camp then, or rather, we sat in the darkness, against the cold rock wall. There would be no sleep there. I said, you took the gold from here, as I will do tomorrow. You bought a house with it, a bride, a good name. His voice came from the darkness. Aye. And they meant nothing to me once I had them, or less than nothing. And if your gold pays for the king over the water to come back to us and rule us and bring about a land of joy and prosperity and warmth, it will still mean nothing to you. It will be something you heard of that happened to a man in a tale. I have lived my life to bring the king back, I told him. He said, you take the gold back to him. Your king will want more gold because kings want more. It is what they do. Each time you come back, it will mean less. The rainbow means nothing. Killing a man means nothing. Silence then, in the darkness. I heard no birds, only the wind that called and gusted about the peaks like a mother seeking her babe. I said, we have both killed men. Have you ever killed a woman, Callum McKinn? I have not. I have killed no woman, no girls. I ran my hands over my dirk in the darkness, seeking the wood and center of the hilt, the steel of the blade. It was there in my hands. I had not intended to ever tell him, only to strike when we were out of the mountains. Strike once, strike deep. But now I felt the words being pulled from me. Would I, or never so? They say there was a girl, I told him, and a thorn bush. Silence. The whistling of the wind. Who told you? He asked. Then, never mind. I would not kill a woman. No man of honor would kill a woman. If I said a word, I knew he would be silent on the subject and never talk about it again. So I said nothing, only waited. Callum McKinn began to speak, choosing his words with care, talking as if he was remembering a tale he had heard as a child and had almost forgotten. They told me the kine of the lowlands were fat and bonny, and that a man could gain honor and glory by adventuring off to the southlands and returning with the fine red cattle. So I went south, and never a cow was good enough, until on a hillside in the lowlands I saw the finest, reddest, fattest cows that ever a man has seen. So I began to lead them away, back the way I had come. She came after me with a stick. The cattle were her father's, she said, and I was a rogue and a knave and all manner of rough things. But she was beautiful, even when angry, and had I not already been a young wife, I might have dealt more kindly with her. Instead, I pulled a knife and touched it to her throat and bade her to stop speaking, and she did stop. I would not kill her. I would not kill a woman, and that is the truth. So I tied her, by her hair, to a thorn tree, and I took her knife from her waistband, to slow her as she tried to free herself, and pushed the blade of it deep into the sod. I tied her to the thorn tree by her long hair, and I thought no more of her as I made off with her cattle. It was another year before I was back that way. I was not after cows that day, but I walked up the side of that bank. It was a lonely spot, and if you had not been looking, you might not have seen it. Perhaps nobody searched for her. I heard they searched, I told him, although some believed her to be taken by reavers. and others believed she ran away with a tinker or went to the city. But still, they searched. I saw what I did see. Perhaps you'd have to have stood where I was standing to see what I did see. It was an evil thing I did, perhaps. Perhaps, he said, I have taken gold from the cave of the mists. I cannot tell any longer if there is good or there is evil. I sent a message by a child at an inn, telling them where she was and where they could find her. I closed my eyes, but the world became no darker. There is evil, I told him. I saw it in my mind's eye. Her skeleton picked clean of clothes, picked clean of flesh, as naked and white as anyone would ever be, hanging like a child's puppet against the thorn bush, tied to a branch above it by its red golden hair. At dawn, said Callum McKinns, as if we had been talking of provisions or the weather, you will leave your dirk behind, for such is the custom, and you will enter the cave and bring out as much gold as you can carry, and you will bring it back with you to the mainland. There's not a soul in these parts, knowing what you carry or where it's from, would take it from you. Then send it to the king over the water, and he will pay his men with it and feed them and buy their weapons. One day he will return. Tell me on that day that there is an evil little man. Asterisk. When the sun was up, I entered the cave. It was damp there. I could hear water running down one wall, and I felt a wind on my face, which was strange, because there was no wind inside the mountain. In my mind, the cave would be filled with gold. Bars of gold would be stacked like firewood, and bags of golden coins would sit between them. There would be golden chains and golden rings, and golden plates, heaped high like the china plates in a rich man's house. I had imagined riches, but there was nothing like that here. Only shadows, only rock. Something was here, though. Something that waited. I have secrets, but there is a secret that lies beneath all my other secrets, and not even my children know it, although I believe my wife suspects, and it is this. My mother was a mortal woman, the daughter of a miller, but my father came to her from out of the west, and to the west he returned when he had had his sport with her. I cannot be sentimental about my parentage. I am sure he does not think of her, and doubts that he ever knew of me. But he left me a body that is small and fast and strong. And perhaps I take after him in other ways. I do not know. I am ugly, and my father was beautiful, or so my mother told me once, but I think that she might have been deceived. I wondered what I would have seen in that cave if my father had been an innkeeper from the lowlands. You would be seeing gold, said a whisper that was not a whisper from deep in the heart of the mountain. It was a lonely voice, and distracted and bored. I would see gold, I said aloud. Would it be real, or would it be an illusion? The whisper was amused. You are thinking like a mortal man, making things always to be one thing or another. It is gold they would see and touch. Gold they would carry back with them, feeling the weight of it the while. Gold they would trade with other mortals for what they needed. What does it matter if it is there or not, if they can see it, touch it, steal it, murder for it? Gold they need, and gold I give them. And what do you take for the gold you give them? Little enough, for my needs are few, and I am old, too old to follow my sisters into the West. I taste their pleasure and their joy. I feed, a little, feed on what they do not need and do not value. A taste of heart, a lick, and a nibble of their fine consciences, a sliver of soul, and in return, a fragment of me leaves this cave with them, and gazes out at the world through their eyes, sees what they see, until their lives are done, and I take back what is mine. Will you show yourself to me? I could see, in the darkness, better than any man born of man and woman could see. I saw something move in the shadows, and then the shadows congealed and shifted, revealing formless things at the edge of my perception, where it meets imagination. Troubled, I said the thing it is proper to say at times, such as this: appear before me in a form that neither harms nor is offensive to me. Is that what you wish? The drip of distant water. Yes, I said. From out of the shadows it came, and it stared down at me with empty sockets, smiled at me with wind-weathered ivory teeth. It was all bone, save its hair, and its hair was red and gold, and wrapped about the branch of a thorn bush. That offends my eyes. I took it from your mind, said a whisper that surrounded the skeleton. Its jawbone did not move. I chose something you loved. This was your daughter, Flora, as she was the last time you saw her. I closed my eyes, but the figure remained. It said, the Reaver waits for you at the mouth of the cave. He waits for you to come out, weaponless and weighed down with gold. He will kill you and take the gold from your dead hands. But I'll not be coming out with gold, will I? I thought of Callum McInnes, the wolf gray in his hair, the gray of his eyes, the line of his dirk. He was bigger than I am, but all men are bigger than I am. Perhaps I was stronger and faster, but he was also fast, and he was strong. He killed my daughter, I thought, then wondered if the thought was mine, or if it had crept out of the shadows and into my head. Aloud I said, is there another way out of this cave? You leave the way you entered, through the mouth of my home. I stood there and did not move, but in my mind I was like an animal in a trap, questing and darting from idea to idea, finding no purchase and no solace and no solution. I said, I am weaponless. He told me that I could not enter this place with a weapon. That was not the custom. It is the custom now, to bring no weapon into my place. It was not always the custom. Follow me, said the skeleton of my daughter. I followed her, for I could see her, even when it was so dark that I could see nothing else. In the shadows it said, it is beneath your hand. I crouched and felt it. The haft felt like bone, perhaps an antler. I touched the blade cautiously in the darkness, discovered that I was holding something that felt more like an awl than a knife. It was thin, sharp at the tip. It would be better than nothing. Is there a price? There is always a price. Then I will pay for it. And I ask one other thing. You say that you can see the world through his eyes. There were no eyes in that hollow skull, but it nodded. Then tell me when he sleeps. It said nothing. It melded into the darkness, and I felt alone in that place. Time passed. I followed the sound of the dripping water, found a rock pool, and drank. I soaked the last of the oats, and I ate them, chewing them until they dissolved in my mouth. I slept and woke and slept again, and dreamed of my wife, Morag, waiting for me as the seasons changed, waiting for me just as we had waited for our daughter, waiting for me forever. Something, a finger I thought, touched my hand. It was not bony and hard. It was soft and human-like, but too cold. He sleeps. I left the cave in the blue light before dawn. He slept across the cave mouth, cat-like, I knew, such that the slightest touch would have woken him. I held my weapon in front of me, a bone handle and a needle-like blade of blackened silver, and I reached out and took what I was after without waking him. Then I stepped closer, and his hand grasped for my ankle, and his eyes opened. Where is the gold? Asked Callum McInnes. I have none. The wind blew cold on the mountainside. I had danced back, out of his reach, when he had grabbed at me. He stayed on the ground, pushed himself up onto one elbow. Then he said, "Where is my dirk?" "I took it," I told him, "while you slept." He looked at me, sleepily. "And why would you ever do that? If I was going to kill you, I would have done it on the way here. I could have killed you 12 times. But I did not have gold then, did I?" He said nothing. I said, "If you think you could have got me to bring the gold from the cave, and that not bringing it out would have saved your miserable soul, then you are a fool." He no longer looked sleepy. "A fool, am I?" He was ready to fight. "It is good to make people who are ready to fight angry." I said, "Not a fool. No, for I have met fools and idiots, and they are happy in their idiocy, even with straw in their hair. You are too wise for foolishness. You seek only misery, and you bring misery with you, and you call down misery on all you touch." He rose then, holding a rock in his hand like an axe, and he came at me. I am small, and he could not strike me as he would have struck a man of his own size. He leaned over to strike. It was a mistake. I held the bone haft tightly and stabbed upward, striking fast with the point of the awl, like a snake. I knew the place I was aiming for, and I knew what it would do. He dropped his rock, clutched at his right shoulder. "My arm," he said. "I cannot feel my arm." He swore then, fouling the air with curses and threats. The dawn light on the mountain top made everything so beautiful and blue. In that light, even the blood that had begun to soak his garments was purple. He took a step back, so he was between me and the cave. I felt exposed, the rising sun at my back. This tale of adventure, mystery, and suspense continues to unfold. The journey to the cave in the Black Mountains is fraught with danger and revelations. What will happen next? Will our protagonist survive his encounter with Callum McInnes? What secrets does the cave hold? Stay tuned for the final part of this gripping story. It promises to be an exciting conclusion you won't want to miss.